We're continuing today a video interview with my daddy, Dick Carter, who turned 89 years old yesterday. We got a good chronology of his life in our first video, and now we have some additional questions of just stories and events, and we'll see what comes up in this conversation. One of the things I thought to ask about are your front teeth. You've only got one front tooth and it's chipped, and I think there are at least a couple of stories there.
Well, I had a supernumerary. I didn't know the word or anything, but there was an extra tooth which prevented the baby tooth from coming out, so this could come down. Well, the dentist just went in there and dug everything out and left me with one tooth. Now, Danny had both of his that way, but we had a good dentist. He removed the supernumeraries and his regular teeth came down, and he has a nice set of teeth. But I was ahead of my time. And so I guess I was fortunate to wind up with one tooth.
Mm-hmm. And then it got chipped. How did it get chipped?
Oh, I don't know.
Wait, first day of work.
Mother says your first day of work.
Well, yeah, I had a wreck on the way to work the first day. I didn't remember my tooth getting chipped, but
It did.
it knocked me out of my socks, clear over in the back of the car. It hurt me, otherwise I went on to work.
And what were you driving that day?
Oh, it was a woody station wagon, and there wasn't much left of it.
Yeah.
A fella crossed the highway ahead of me, just as somebody was coming the other way, and he crossed and forced them to either hit him or move over in the lane. And he moved over, and I was in that lane, coming right at him. So I lost my car and my shoes, and I didn't realize that I chipped a tooth. I guess I went on to work since it was the first day. I don't know how I got there.
Well, that was when you were going to work for Southwestern Public Service in Borger. Mother said you had some interesting stories about jobs that you worked at as a teenager. What was the first job you had?
Oh, goodness, milking cows, I guess was where the first time I had a regular job. My buddy's father, Jim Tharp, they were milking 7 cows, night and morning. And they also wanted to do farm work, so he hired me to come and stayed at their house, because Bill was my friend. I got a nickel every time I milked a cow. So that was, what, 14 nickels at 70 cents in room and board I got on my first job like that. I'd had odd jobs around, but that's the first time I ever had an extended contract. Stayed there for, I guess, a summer, maybe a whole month, I don't remember. One old roan cow had tits about half an inch long. And she was really hard to milk.
Well, what did you do with the money?
Well, I bought me a single shot bolt action 22. I guess I don't know, there wasn't much other left over, I don't know.
And what did you do with the 22?
Oh, shot rabbits. Of course, ammunition was scarce. During the war, you couldn't find much.
Did you have other jobs before you went off to the Marines?
Oh, I worked for, I never had another everyday job, you know. I mean, I just had odd jobs around. Worked for Clint Ragsdale at the Hardesty Mercantile in the summertime. He sold ice. We'd have to go to Guyman to get it. He sold coal in the winter. Oh, delivered some coal. But the most fun was the chicken feed. Came in fancy colored sacks, had patterns on them, and these were all stacked in a building, and the ladies always wanted the one on the bottom of the stack. So I got pretty good work out there. I think I got $15 a week there. And then there was a joke there that's not in poor taste, I guess, but it's not for polite society. Zipper flies on pants. These were new thing. Well, Winnie Ragsdale, Clint's wife, was quite a gregarious lady. She liked everybody to talk to her. So she was telling one of the Phillips men, said, you ought to get one of these zipper fly pants. He said, oh, no, I don't know. He said, I had a zipper jacket once and it cut off my necktie.
Well, I think anybody who's spent time here, overnight time in the house, would remember you singing around the house. And I always remember you singing either snippets of hymns or bits of songs from the Pogo comic strip or your version of some old popular song. There were a few years when I was in school, maybe after Mother started teaching, that you would make breakfast on weekday mornings. And you would sing to announce the status of the meal preparation. And so you've always been a singer, but you kind of got off to a rocky start. You want to tell about the Easter pageant at school?
Well, that's when I got to be a rabbit. Yeah. Well, I thought we talked about that. Anyway, the Lydia Mel, she was then as a third grade teacher, and she was putting on an Easter pageant at school, and and in casting it, she had each one of us come and stand by her and sing. I don't remember what we sang, but whatever, some little ditty that was going to be in the program, and so she wanted to hear us sing. And after I sang, she said, how would you like to be an Easter bunny? Which I didn't realize I was being rejected as a singer. So my mother made me an Easter bunny suit, and I hopped around the stage, but not singing.
And then there were a few years when you and Mother were in the church choir.
I don't remember being in the choir. Well, yeah, I guess I did. Anybody could be in the choir.
Yeah,
All you had to do is just go up there.
yeah.
Maybe I did. I don't remember that.
Well, you used to tell about the different sections of the choir. They would have the sopranos and the altos and the tenors and the basses and Dick Carter and Bill Bresco.
Bill who?
Bill Bresco, remember him?
Briscoe. Oh yeah, that was an airman at the air base out here. Yeah, he used to come home with us to eat. But I don't remember us being in the choir, I guess. It was just so natural that
Yeah.
anybody that wanted to could be in the choir.
You've always been kind of a Renaissance man, and we talked yesterday about some of your interests in carving and amateur archaeology and things like that. There were a lot of years that you did photography.
Yeah, I did my own work. I developed an allergy to the chemicals and I couldn't do that anymore because I just break out in water blisters if I got the stuff on me. But I built me a enlarger, a couple of tin cans and a big old lens. And it worked. I could make enlargements. And I don't remember. Didn't have a real dark room. I guess I was working at night. I don't remember.
Mother said some of the students from the school at Pritchett would come and learn.
Yeah, they'd watch me.
And I remember that you built a 45 RPM record player. You remember that?
Well, I didn't build the player. I took a little one and kind of upgraded it in. Well, actually, what I built was a little cabinet to put it in. And I don't remember what kind of records we had.
We had a lot of classical music.
I don't remember that.
I remember that.
Now, one thing about that, though, I found out accidentally. Somehow, after I got through setting it up, it would pick up radio broadcasts. And it wouldn't, wasn't supposed to be that anymore, but it did. For the neighborhoods, if in those days they'd had the telephones we have now, it would have picked them up too, probably. I could have spied on them.
We talked about the amateur archaeology and work with the museum and the Archaeological Society. And then later, Dan remembered about your work at the Alabates Flint Quarry. Tell us some about that.
Well, I didn't really work there. Well, I helped survey to locate pits, and there were some ruins over there that we might have worked on those a little. But that's an interesting location when you I can't remember how many pits there are. To me, like 40-some pits around over that area where the Indians had dug out the flint. They would dig down the ledges of elevated dolomite that had become agatized, uncover one of those, and then they go in there with wood wedges and split off chunks of the rock, find suitable work for suitable pieces for making artifacts. And they would also trade those out. There have been several places around the area where people have found caches of elevated flint pieces maybe big as your hand. Obviously, they would check them out at the quarry to be sure they didn't have any more breaks or anything in them, and then they would make up a pack and they'd trade them off somewhere. So some of those have been found. I've never found one. Well, I did find one over there too, north of, between Boys Ranch and Vega. I found a cache that obviously some guy had been carrying, probably had it in a buckskin bag, and he buried it for some reason and never did come back. So there was all that flint stacked in there.
But you all worked then as volunteers at the visitor center at the Alabates Quarry.
Well, I don't remember what we did. Well, they required, I don't know what was required, but you just didn't let people turn them loose and go up there by themselves. You'd meet them down at the visitor center and then lead them up the trail, and of course giving them a little bit of information as you went along. Tell them to be careful of the rattlesnake that lived down there on the edge of the canyon.
What about the first visitor center?
Well, yeah, the first summer, the visitor center was my old pickup. We parked it there, and I think we stretched a tarp out on the side of it for shade. I have a picture of that somewhere. Visitor center at Alabates Quarry. There was some nice crystals in pockets in that flint in places. I think Sally Beavan, somebody had some jewelry made out of some of it. It was that be?
Amethyst.
Gemstone is purple.
Amethyst?
Yeah, it was amethyst.
Well, Rachel wanted to get on video a story that she had heard you tell about a time when you were little, I don't know how little, going someplace and it was a flood situation.
Flood. Oh, yeah. When the Paladura Creek, before the modern highways, when it would get up, it'd just come up and cover the whole bottom down there. Maybe a mile of the highway might be underwater. And we were in Hardesty. I guess, I don't know, but Dad and I and Shorty Long who lived down in there. And we were gonna take Shorty Long home. On the way, and the car ran out down there about a mile from his house. And so Shorty said, well, Harvey, I guess we'll have to bunk up at my place tonight. So they got out, and Dad was carrying me, and the water came up almost over his cowboy boots out there in the middle of the road. But I remember how, and I don't really know, and I remember this, but it seems like I remember feeling so safe because Dad had his cowboy boots on. And we got up to George's place, and his house was an old converted chicken house, and he had pallet on the floor. I remember him rolling me on there, and I don't remember anything else till morning. And of course, didn't have telephones, so Mom might have thought we had drowned. She didn't know where we were. We were going to town, we didn't come home. But the next day, they got home. And then Dad told an interesting story. Had nothing to do with that. About some of his cohorts. They had a big old car, yeah. Well, it's a touring car, and the glass in those early cars, it wasn't safety glass, it was just plate glass. And he came along, and these guys were out there. The car had stalled, it wouldn't run. And they were out there with the crank and some wrenches just beating out all the windows and the windshield in the back of their car. He thought that was interesting. I don't know if that made it start. At least they were getting some satisfaction.
Well, you told us the other day at the table, but I didn't ask you on tape, about the garage your dad owned.
Yeah, the DCD Garage there at Sutton's Grove. It was just an ordinary auto repair shop. But I don't know whether there was another one any closer than Beaver or maybe 30 miles away, you know. So I don't know what kind of stock of material he had, but if your car wouldn't run, you could come over there. And he had a mechanic full time because he had to carry mail in the mornings. I guess I don't know how many years they were there. But they were listed on if you go to Google right now and put in DCD Highway, it'll tell you about the Denver Canadian in Dallas. And we talked about this before. There was not a highway system marked with signs like we have today. You kind of wended your way through the neighborhood. And so there was a guidebook that would tell you, go 3 miles down here to the Red Barn, turn left, and go 5 miles to Hog Pen and turn right, and so on. It would lead you through the country. Otherwise, you'd just be out there trying to guess which road to take. And there was a guidebook. I'd like to see one. So I suppose there was a book because it's mentioned on Google. You could read a little bit about it. I guess it ran from Denver through Canadian to Dallas, DCD, Dad said that stood for damn crooked and dangerous. And I imagine some of the people thought that fit well when they drove over. But we can't conceive today of just going out without any major highways or anything. Just find your way along the country roads to where you want to go. So a guidebook would be helpful.
And then I remembered a story you told about, we heard in the interview yesterday that the house your dad built in town was just about a block from your school and about a block from your church. As I recall, it was a couple of blocks at least to the general store. So
Yeah.
it wasn't a big town. But a story your mother told you about what to do if you got lost.
No, I don't remember that. What was it, do you know?
What I was remembering was that because you lived close to the church, you could look up and find the steeple, and then you could.
Oh, yeah, you could always, of course, it could be pretty hard to get lost. Everybody knew you. Now, during the Dust Bowl days, you could get lost. We'd ride our bicycles around town, and some days it was, if you weren't familiar with it, you could get lost. But if you did, everybody in town knew you. They'd tell you where you went, where you needed to go. We had an interesting neighbor there. Well, she was a block and a half away. Her husband was the manager for the local power company, which at that point was, I've forgotten the name of it. Anyway, they lived a block north of us. And the lady was different. She would stand out in front of her house with a pistol and shoot down past our house at a sign on the railroad down there. Just bang, bang, bang. I don't know if she ever hit it, but I remember hearing her, seeing her shooting. Yeah, one time my buddy and I decided we would dig a ditch across the street. It was all dirt streets. And our house was out the edge of town. We decided we would just dig a ditch right across the street. And I don't know what our purpose was. I guess maybe to slow up traffic or something. And we dug a while, and somebody just waded this. But you could, for quite some time, you could see that depression where we dug a hole. Kids had a lot of fun in those days. One time we had a maze of sunflowers. They had a really good sunflower year, and there was a bunch of, I don't know where it came from, across the street from our house, which was a vacant lot. There was a lot of dirt that had been hauled in there, and that grew up in sunflowers that were taller than my head. And so we cut a path out in there, and we dug a cave. There weren't any bluffs with caves. We just dug a hole in the ground and threw some boards over it. And then that was our cave. And we had a fireplace in there and a smoke hole in the top. But the trouble was, if you got in there and got a fire going, then some of your friends would come along and throw a board over the smoke hole. Smoke you out. Wonder we survived.
How about riding your bikes to the creek?
About what?
Riding your bikes to the creek.
Oh, yeah, it was 7 miles down to the swimming hole. Down the county country road there. We'd ride bicycles out there. And what was really bad there, I guess we'd go barefooted. But where you turned off of the road to go down to the creek was a bunch of sand. And boy, on a hot summer day, that'd burn your feet. It would also slow down your bicycle when you turned. And if you didn't get through before, well, you'd fall off and then you were in that hot sand with your bare feet. That was pretty exciting. We'd go down there though and swim in the creek. It was about 8 feet deep, I guess. Under this tree, we'd jump in there and swim around. They had a baptismal service there one time. And my older brother, I guess, maybe, I don't know whether they believed in rebaptism or not, or maybe that was the only time he was ever baptized. He and his buddy got baptized and had on overalls. And then after the preacher baptized them, would hand people back up to the back, they just went swimming off down the creek. Yeah, that was a really a great swimming hole. And the interesting thing was, you think back on it, all kinds of people went there. They never bothered to ask Emil Steffens if they could go swimming in his creek. They just took it for granted that it was a public swimming hole. He had lots of patience.
Well, thank you.
Yes.